than it is an attempt to open a discussion.
Well, I think it's a demonstrable evidence that through society's demographics that being white has societal privileges that being black does not. But
we can talk about how that manifests, because that's
I'm also interested in what you just said now, is that you would stand next to anyone who has this. So, Mr. Shapiro, my question to you is, for Ms. Dunston, the tying the noose around the campus and writing messages that target African-American young students, would you consider that hate speech, and then would you stand next to her?
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Congress Flash. Today we break down what happens when Ben Shapiro is faced with a congressional lecture on white privilege and critical race theory. Spoiler, it doesn't end well for the Congresswoman. In this video, I'm breaking down the key moments from Shapiro's explosive exchange points that show exactly how he turned the narrative upside down, challenged the emotional talking points, and stood firm on logic and principle. Let's get into it. It all starts with a Congress
about white privilege. And just this week, I had a conversation with Rachel Lazar, who's done some work, a Jewish American woman who's done some work on this area, as well as having extensive conversations with Dr. Greg Parks of Wake Forest University, who's also talked quite a bit about critical race theory. And it's my understanding that white privilege is not telling individuals that they cannot speak, but it is a term for societal privilege that individuals have as a benefit of their white skin. And I don't think that, and I think universities would be remiss to then say that because you're white, you're not allowed to say anything that's critical of white people. I didn't know that white privilege actually went into that sphere. My understanding is it's just, and the issue is that white privilege makes people uncomfortable to talk about the societal privilege that they have.
Well, to me, what I say on campuses all the time is, if you want to cite instances of racism that we can all find and fight together, that's something that I am more than willing to stand next to you and fight, because that's obviously stuff that we should fight together. But when you just say that there is a white privilege out there in the ether and that by dint of birth your skin color generates for you an advantage, what you're really saying to people is that your view is less valuable because you have not experienced what I've experienced. And that is an identity argument, that's a character argument, that's not a rational political argument that can actually be taken on in any way. It's more of a cudgel and a club than it is an attempt to open a discussion.
Well, I think
it all starts with a Congresswoman trying to define white privilege, not as a tool to silence, she says, but to highlight societal inequality. She frames it as an objective reality, that being white carries advantages in society. A statement we've heard a lot in recent years. But then comes the pivot, Shapiro's rebuttal. He doesn't just disagree, he calls it what it is, a character attack.
Well,
when you tell
demonstrable evidence that through society's demographics that being white has societal privileges that being black does not. But
we can talk about how that manifests, because that's
I'm also interested in what you just said now, is that you would stand next to anyone who has this. So, Mr. Shapiro, my question to you is, for Ms. Dunston, the tying the noose around the campus and writing messages that target African-American young students, would you consider that hate speech, and then would you stand next to her and fight for her?
As I say, I would. This is the first I'm hearing about it, honestly. But
really,
yeah. But from hearing about it, maybe because it's local. I mean, I'm from LA. But in any case, I'm more than happy to stand alongside her and fight whatever group was responsible for this. Not only more than happy. I mean, you're talking about the alt-right. Again, I was the #1 target of anti-Semitic harassment from the alt-right last year. So I'm more than happy to do all that. And I think there's one more distinction that has to be made. When we talk about cases like Taylor's, they're horrific, and the administration is siding with Taylor. Okay, the administration is doing the right thing by Taylor, or trying to do the right thing by Taylor, as they should be. And I think that we need to make a distinction between cases where the administration is actively participating in the suppression of speech and cases in which the administration is trying to do the right thing in order to punish people for application of crime.
When you tell someone they're privileged simply because of their skin color, you're not opening a dialogue, you're implying that their opinion is less valid. That's not how you have an honest political debate. That's how you shut one down. Shapiro digs deeper. He calls out the shift from ideas to identity, the growing trend where who you are matters more than what you say. This isn't debate, it's emotional weaponry. It's about using labels like privileged or oppressed to end conversations before they start. And let me ask you, how can a country solve its problems if half the people are told their opinions don't count because of how they were born? If you're tired of identity politics running the show, hit that subscribe button right now. We dig into topics like this every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming. Here's where it gets real. The Congresswoman brings up a horrific campus incident, a noose in messages targeting black students. She asks Shapiro point blank, "Would you stand with the victim?" Without hesitation, Shapiro says yes. He hadn't even heard about the case, but calls it horrific and makes it clear he'd stand shoulder to shoulder with the victim and fight whoever was responsible. But then he draws the line, the difference between fighting actual hate and promoting vague ideological frameworks like systemic privilege, punishing crimes. That's justice. Censoring speech in the name of ideology? That's dangerous. Shapiro doesn't stop at theory. He brings in his own experience, as the #1 target of anti-Semitic harassment from the alt-right. This isn't someone who ignores hate. This is someone who has lived through it, and still refuses to let identity define truth. He supports real accountability, real justice, but he won't let vague theories or guilt by identity replace actual facts and open dialogue. He exposes the flaw in the left's argument. They don't want a debate. They want compliance. And Shapiro, he's not playing that game. By the end, the Congresswoman is out of gas. Her talking points fall flat. Shapiro stays composed, factual, unshaken, and whether you agree with him or not, one thing is clear. This wasn't a debate. It was a lesson in clarity, courage, and refusing to bow to identity narratives. If you're ready for more breakdowns like this, where we unpack the arguments, cut through the noise, and bring the logic front and center, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. And let me know in the comments, do you think Shapiro nailed it, or did the Congresswoman have a point that got lost in the noise? See you in the next one.